In these moments, time stretches or disappears entirely. Every action feels effortless. You are so immersed that the work becomes its own reward. Far more often, the day is defined by a constant stream of notifications, low-level anxiety, and a loud inner critic that second-guesses every move you make. We often treat peak performance like lightning, a random strike of inspiration reserved for extreme athletes or once-in-a-generation artistic geniuses. Modern neuroscience identifies being in the zone as a specific, repeatable neurobiological sequence known as the flow state. This chart visualizes the 700% spike in creative output reported by researchers at the Flow Genome Project. Accessing that potential requires shifting from waiting for inspiration toward mastering a biological cycle. Phase 1 is the struggle. Initial frustration is a biological requirement of the cycle. This matrix plots challenge versus skill. Entering the upper right quadrant triggers a flight or flight response, spiking cortisol and norepinephrine to sharpen focus. This stress response generates fast-moving beta waves. You need this highly alert state to gather raw information for the work ahead. Eventually, the brain hits a wall. At this point, phase 2 begins, the release. You must step away from the task and purposefully disconnect your conscious mind from the problem. Stepping away flushes stress hormones from the system, as by sailing a boat in the middle of a lake, deliberately triggering this shift in brain activity. The brain requires this period of agitation, followed by purposeful distraction to prime itself for what comes next. Returning to the task after a release allows the brain waves to settle on the borderline between alpha and theta frequencies. This is phase 3, the flow state. This sequence relies on a neurological mechanism called transient hypofrontality. Here is the prefrontal cortex, the center for self-doubt. In flow, it powers down. Self-consciousness vanishes. Simultaneously, the brain floods with dopamine, endorphins, and anandamide. This flood triggers gamma spikes, fast electrical pulses connecting disparate ideas, creating the effortless problem-solving of flow. Peak creative output occurs when the brain strategically powers down its restrictive centers. Phase 4 is the recovery. Despite the effortless sensation, flow is taxing on the central nervous system. Ernest Hemingway managed this toll by stopping his work at a peak moment of excitement, ensuring he had the psychological momentum to start again tomorrow. Biology demands this period of replenishment. You must slow down enough to trigger deep delta waves and release serotonin to restore depleted chemical reserves. Chasing the neurochemical high without paying the physiological toll leads to burnout. Without active recovery like sleep or aimless play, the brain cannot sustain this output. Performance is a finite biological resource. Without intentional rest, there is no future flow. Flow functions as a tangible biological framework that can be integrated into a daily routine. This framework allows us to redefine our relationship with effort. We can view the discomfort of the struggle phase as a signal to continue rather than a reason to quit. We can permit ourselves to step away for the release and defend our time for recovery. Prolific creators like Gabriel Garcia Marquez structured their environments to repeatedly ride this specific biological sequence. Maintaining this level of output requires strict limits. Stephen Ting writes at least 2,000 words a day, but stops once he reaches that goal, preserving the neurobiology needed for the next session. Sustaining high creative performance requires learning to ride the brain's natural rhythm.